See the Semantics, episode 282. It is November 25th, 2024. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Recording this on a Monday evening. A rainy, sort of drizzly kind of evening going on. Luckily, at least for my for my sake, it will be a lot sunnier going on tomorrow. Which is good. I do welcome some sun after a week of just kind of continuous rain and whatnot. I mean, it did stop during the weekend when I recorded it a little earlier, but anyways, I just would just a little, it's not too bad, at least around here. I know some other places have gotten hit a bit harder with the rain and everything, but it's nice to kind of get back into a bit more of like a cooler, wintry sort of vibe. Obviously, keeping an eye out on more potential rain later in December and all that shit. But whatever, just you take it as they come. This week got Thanksgiving coming up. Usually on my end, it's pretty chill. Not a ton going on necessarily. But it's all right. It's a pretty relatively relaxed week for the most part. I think that, I talk about this every year. I'm pretty sure since I've started this podcast, I have talked about the transition going from Thanksgiving into Black Friday every single year. I think I've commented on that. I mean, I don't know what else there is to say. I just think it's funny. I just think it's a funny, going from, listen, again, you can go back to last year when I talked about it. If you want to go all the way back, you can also go back 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago when I was talking about Black Friday and the whiplash. You go from that, from Thanksgiving. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what else to really add to that conversation, but, Thanksgiving, historically, it's not, the way it's presented or the way it has been presented. I think now more recently, at least for the past decade or so, I think there has been a reckoning with the fact that the way in which Thanksgiving has been historically presented to at least American children is historically inaccurate, right? Just regarding Native Americans and all that shit. And so we more so have sort of recontextualize, rename, have, Native Americans have sort of reclaimed November to be a month for Native American Heritage Month, right? And Thanksgiving is less of a, day of this moment of celebration between the Pilgrims and Native Americans, and more so, just kind of another day, at least for other people, you know what I mean? And I don't think there's anything really wrong with that. It's such a funny, it's so interesting. It's such a strange kind of tradition. But then again, you could probably point to really any tradition and be like, that's kind of weird, right? Like how that initially came about and how we've, essentially changed it to fit sort of modern standards. And now the modern, whatever modern standards that were sort of held up before has kind of, changed. And, I think over time it just kind of whittles away, and maybe it's not as important for some people. For other people, maybe it's just like a different time. I myself, I don't think for most people, most kids, whatever, they don't look at Thanksgiving as like really it's just the food, honestly, right? And then outside of that, it's just kind of like I don't know, get together with family if you have extended family and whatnot. But really outside of that, it's not the same as Christmas, right? Christmas is the whole thing. That's what everybody not everybody, but it's what kids predominantly look forward to, right? I do think, and I've sort of addressed this a little while back. Obviously, I think as you get older, the way you approach something like that, kind of like a holiday like Christmas, changes over time. You have a different perspective on things. For other people, it's a really hard time. So it's just interesting, right? how these sort of things change over time, and how obviously, the predominant kind of view of Christmas, at least, like it just sort of exempt or just outside of like the Christian, connotation of it, Christian, Jewish, like, attachment to it. Obviously, like, Judaism has, Hanukkah, but I mean, just kind of without the religious connection with Christmas, it's a time to buy a lot of shit. And I just sort of, I think that, one, I don't like, really, I'm not someone who is like a fan of receiving gifts. I think as I've gotten older, I've just sort of become kind of a person who just isn't interested in that, really. I'm just like, I don't like, if there's something that I really want to get, I'll just get it. Like, I don't really need, I'd like, if there's like some shit that I want, I'll just try, save up and maybe get it later. It's not really something that I have to, I don't know. It's different now. Yeah, I don't know. I just have a different kind of relationship with like gifting and stuff like that. Of course, if someone gifts me something, I'm not going to be like, like repulsed by it or anything like that. But I do think, and someone told me this like a long time ago, and I kind of respected their sort of, perspective and their wants, right? Like, they were like very adamantly like, yo, don't give me a gift, because I'm just not, like, I'm not comfortable with it. Like, I don't want to feel obligated, and I know it's just kind of their boundary, which I feel like is cool. I respect that. You know what I mean? I don't think I'm to that point where I'm like, I don't like, I'm not like, I'm like against gifts or whatever. It's just not something that I prioritize. But I do think that there is like a way to be like, hey, listen, respectfully, I don't want gifts. I think there's a way to kind of communicate that, which I think is good. I think that's sort of a good approach as well. Yeah, I don't know. I am curious. I always kind of look at it from the lens of where I was before as a kid, and like looking at it now. I don't know. I'm just like, it's at a weird point. I'm at a weird point in my life, right? Because it's like, I'm sort of in the in-between, not in between, but I'm an adult, but like, I'm still, I'm getting closer to the point where I'm closer to the point where I've spent more of my time as an adult versus when I was a kid, which is pretty wild, right? Like, it's getting there. It's not quite there yet. Probably it's going to be another, 10 plus years before I get to that point, but it is kind of creeping up along there, right? So I don't know. It's just kind of like, I'm looking back at that sort of period, from up until, I mean, honestly, it's like, I think 16, 17, 18, I no longer really had any of those sort of wants. Like, my kind of approach and my perspective at that point was becoming a little bit more solidified in terms of the way I viewed, the world, and viewed certain events and whatnot. But I just think it's funny, as the more you kind of learn about things, like, sometimes, I mean, in a lot of cases, that does sort of taint your vision of what happened before. I think history, speaking of history, like that's a huge thing, right? Like, people have just had to come to, including myself, like, have come to terms with the history of, this country and everything like that. And, the way in which we celebrate things and whatnot, right? It just completely changes things, and it changes your approach and how you view those things, and whether you decide to like celebrate it or not, right? Like, are you just going to be kind of flippant about it and just kind of keep doing the same thing as you did when you were 10 years old? Like, you can't treat those kinds of things. It's like, it's one of those things where it's like once you have that knowledge, like you just can't put that back in the box, right? I sometimes there are instances where you could argue that ignorance is bliss and all that stuff, right? But I think most of the time it's like, what if you didn't have that knowledge of something beforehand, like how are you going to become a potentially better person? How are you going to be able to adjust later in your period? Like if you learned about, I don't know, maybe you learned about it's like you didn't know about Thanksgiving until you were like, you didn't know about the history of it until you were like 60 or 70, right? I mean, I'm sure there were definitely people that are like that, but it's just like at that point it's like I don't know, is that like an earth-shattering thing? I don't know. It's like is that something that are you going to be able to change at that point on? Are you going to treat it any differently? Like it's a little, I don't know. It's sort of, I think that it is in a lot of cases better to have some of that knowledge. You can't know everything, but it is good to have knowledge on some things, right? I do think it can go, in the full other direction where you know everything about everything, and that I think that's going to drive people kind of crazy, right? You can't do that to yourself, but it is good to be aware of the things around you. It just sort of got me thinking a little bit because I know this is going to be a very rough transition. I've been thinking a little bit about Xenosaga, the game, and the series. So I haven't really played through it, but I have watched and listened kind of like a playthrough and that kind of thing. I do want to play it someday. Obviously, I do want to eventually play through the entire, Xeno like universe, if you want to call it that, because I played through Blade. I'm gonna play X next, Xenoblade X, when that comes out next year. And then I do want to eventually play Xenogears and Xenosaga. Xenosaga, though, back to my point before I get super sidetracked. I think it does a really good job of illustrating when there's multiple characters essentially who learn just everything. Like they just obtain knowledge in itself, where they learn just everything about just the universe, and it drives them completely insane, right? To the point where they're committing just like complete acts of, just atrocities and stuff like that, to like cope with them dealing with just the knowledge of all that is, out there. And I think that's sort of like maybe the parameter, or maybe just sort of the line that people might be crossing nowadays, especially with, I've sort of talked about this maybe a while back in terms of like doom scrolling and stuff like that. I've gotten a lot better about doing that. I just don't do that. Like if I need to know information, I'll be aware of it and whatnot. But to just be like constantly on the news sites or whatever and just like staying up on everything that's happening in the world is just not gonna do anyone really any benefits, right? Like you just can't. You can do the best you can. I think it's just incredibly difficult to try to tackle all of the problems at once, right? And then on top of that, take care of yourself, right? I mean, yourself kind of comes first, but I think a lot of people, you could see a lot of people just maybe like trying to, I don't know, do a bunch of other stuff and take care of like world problems when it's just not entirely feasible. There are tangible things that you can do, like actually in real life, the best that you can for the people around you and stuff. But to try to tackle world problems all at once is just it's not going to help. And the fact that you are sort of aware of them, while that might be beneficial in allowing you to maybe teach other people that there are, certain things that are happening in the world, I just don't think just having just the knowledge in itself that these things are happening and trying to, act on every single one of them is sort of an impossible task. So you have to manage things. You can do the best that you can, but you also have to take care of yourself too. So I don't know. It just sort of, just having some level of knowledge, some level of, just knowing things, I think is good, of course, but also having all of it is not really beneficial, I think. You know what I mean? I don't know if there's really a real life example of a case where there's a person who just is I don't know, maybe they have some sort of condition that allows them to be hyper aware of everything that is happening. But I'm curious if that someone like that has existed before, or, is currently alive, and how they deal with that kind of thing, right? Like, how do you deal with just understanding and knowing everything that you could, try to, not like, within reason, of course, but, like, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with all that? Like, you can't cram everything into your brain, I don't think. Yeah, I don't know, just sort of has me thinking. anyways, back to Thanksgiving. So I always forget, like, I believe Thanksgiving, are there games on Thanksgiving? I know there's like football games for Thanksgiving. I always forget if there's NBA games during Thanksgiving. I'm not entirely sure. I think there might be. Or there might be like a day break or something. I'm not entirely sure. But I think it's going to be, because we're sort of like reaching the end of the NBA Cup and whatnot. I think it doesn't, maybe it's just me, it doesn't have the same level of excitement as it did last year. I don't think it's going to have the same, if you look back on things, it's probably not going to be as high viewership, you know what I mean? And I know there's been a continuous conversation about lower viewership and whatnot. I sort of talked about that, I think, a couple weeks back. But, yeah, listen, I already said this. The courts, you got to figure out the courts. You got to figure out, I think there's like a few things that you have to sort of nail down when it comes to the Cup. One is obviously the courts. I don't know what else to add. Those things look atrocious, a lot of them. Yeah, it's like, no shit, people are not going to watch it if it looks like that. Two is timing. It's a weird time. Like, I already said this, but it's too close to the beginning of the year. I think it has to be sort of in, I don't know, maybe in December. Like, obviously, it's hard to do it maybe. I know I said, like, later towards the season, but I understand that sort of coincides with, like, March Madness and shit like that. You can't really do it. You can't really do that. February is kind of tough because you got the Super Bowl. But maybe, like, December, because then it's sort of like a halfway point, and it will be like a decent sort of transition going into Christmas as well, right? So maybe like early December. I know it is technically, the Cup starts in November and then it ends in December, but maybe start like now and then end in, maybe end towards Christmas a little more. I don't know. It just, the timing doesn't feel the best. Or I don't know. It's just an idea. Another thing, like, it probably incentives, right? There's got to be, because, like, the incentive, I do think they had, like, a good setup last year, and we'll see how it goes, because it's not over yet. Like, we're still not, we're not at the knockout rounds yet, so we'll see what it looks like. The final game was sort of like disappointing with the Lakers and the Pacers. Like, it wasn't the most interesting. I do think, like, the Pacers sort of run in the Cup was sort of a nice, was a nice story. And then it sort of, I think in some ways helped kind of motivate them, or sort of maybe push that team to make that kind of run. It gave them kind of the sort of the experience in it to be in sort of like high pressure situations, which I think helped sort of lead to better results going into the playoffs and allowing them to get to like the Eastern Conference Finals and that kind of thing. So I think the Pacers example is probably the best one to look at, right? To being like, hey, listen, there's like a young and up and coming team with a younger kind of star on the rise, and then look at his performance, and they were really propping him up. Obviously, the Pacers are not doing very well this year. They're sort of they're really kind of middle of the pack in the Eastern Conference, right? For the time being, they can probably bounce back, but it's like, okay, what in terms of, again, I said something about kind of narratives and creating narratives, and I know it sucks because like it's stupid, it's like it's sort of artificial in a sense, but if you are, I'm looking at it from the lens of the NBA, where it's like, if we want to somehow get viewership back up or whatever, we need to find a new sort of star outside of our aging ones. Who's like a new up and coming exciting player that we can like showcase to casual viewers and that kind of thing, right? And I don't know, based on the whoever's like competing, I don't really, we'll see how it goes, but it's a little hard to see like what teams and what players are going to kind of come out as sort of the new the new the new generation, right? I don't know. It's sort of it's an interesting predicament. I really look. I personally don't care because I'll watch it regardless. But I think that there is like maybe a bit of an issue in terms of messaging and whatnot with the NBA in terms of how they're portraying teams outside of the ones that they've been doing for the longest time, right? With the Warriors is with Steph and LeBron and stuff like that. So we'll see how that goes. I'm interested in seeing how this kind of cup this year goes, and what other tweaks they can do moving forward. I've been just kind of continuing to play through Dragon Quest 3. It's been nice. It's such like a it's nothing crazy. Nothing super unexpected. Just a good old JRPG, man. And that's some good stuff right there. I think that I really haven't played, sort of a traditional JRPG in quite some time. Like, I played Dragon Quest 11 like 3 years ago at this point, 3-4 years ago. So it's been a while since I've really delved back into kind of that style, because like a lot of the JRPGs that I have been playing are much more modern. Obviously, you could look at like Xenoblade, Persona, even Final Fantasy. Like Final Fantasy, 10 is a bit more modern, right? You could argue it's a bit more of like classical turn-based style, but I'm talking like 90s like JRPGs, right? Like it's been a while since I've really gone back into that. So it's nice. It's a nice little kind of reminder. I've had, it's been, like, it hasn't really been super challenging, at least with the mode that I've been playing. I don't think that I'll ever really get into Draconian, which is the hardest difficulty. There's just too many attributes and other things that are being added on that I just can't handle. I just don't have the patience for that kind of thing. It's just like, it just kind of makes the game more grindier, and I'm just like, nah. I'm not the biggest fan of that, and I'm probably not going to really. I don't like it when it's super grindy. I don't mind the grind because it's, I don't know, it's sort of, it's kind of relaxing in some ways. But when it's to the point where it's just like I'm putting in so many hours just to get these characters levels up, like I'm just not interested. I am thinking, because I think I'm like a decent way through the game. It's not like super long, which is nice. I'm already kind of thinking ahead a little bit in sort of a good way. I do have games already that I have in my library that I haven't played yet. I think some of the games that have sort of interested me a little bit, and I sort of maybe mentioned this as well, but games that I kind of want to get into. Alan Wake has sort of come up on my list. Obviously Yakuza, the sort of the remake, and then also the port that was done for the Switch. I am kind of interested in picking that up. Those are a couple of the games. Maybe I'll get into Okami finally. I don't know. I feel like I have to sort of be in the right headspace to play something that, and apparently there's a ton of dialogue in Okami as well, which is a bit, I don't know if I want to read like a ton, but there's a lot of interesting games out there, and I do kind of want to maybe consider more about what I want to pick up next. Do I want to get into another story, a bit more of like a hefty game? Do I want to play like a shorter game, that kind of thing? Because I do have, my list, and there's a ton of games on there. So I have a lot of options. It's just sort of like, just thinking about what I want to kind of spend my time with over the next, month or so leading into like next year. But yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy that I'm happy with kind of the expected length of Dragon Quest 3. It's nice, sort of. It's interesting. It's nice because I love my 100-hour plus JRPGs, right? I do. Maybe some of them are a little too long in the tooth, but I still enjoy just putting all this time in and connecting with the characters and stuff like that. But just having just this very, just like the kind of traditional RPG and getting into that, it's been nice. It's been really fun to kind of retread that, going back to my roots, as I said before. Anyways, that's probably gonna do it for now. Next time I record will probably be this upcoming weekend. Probably talk more games. Probably talk some more basketball. Any developments in the cup, in the IST Cup, or as known as the Emirates Cup. And then I'll probably talk about whatever else comes up. There's been a few Switch 2 rumors here and there. I'm not expecting anything this year, really. It's probably going to be an announcement next year, so I'm not holding on too much there, but I've seen some kind of whispers here and there, so maybe something pops up, but I don't know. I kind of doubt anything significant is really going to pop up for the rest of the year. Anyways, that's going to do it for now. I'll catch up later this week or weekend. All right, it is Saturday, November 30th. Recording this on a Saturday evening. It's been a nice little sort of Thanksgiving break, I would say. I've been, just taking the time just to sort of relax and stuff. Usually nothing too crazy happens for me. I've already mentioned this earlier in the week, but usually Thanksgiving is not nothing too much is really happening, but it's a good time for it's a good time to just sort of rest up, relax, and that kind of thing. Unfortunately, I have sort of kind of messed up a little bit of my sleep. I've been kind of staying up a little too late recently, just kind of falling back into old habits. I've been actually, I'd say up until now, I've actually been pretty good. I think I've been pretty solid in terms of maintaining my routine and getting sufficient sleep and whatnot. But today was like, I guess the last couple of days, but today in particular, it kind of hit me. I'm like, fuck, dude. I am feeling out of it. I am feeling real out of it, but it's okay. I'll get back into it, going into next week. So it's all right. It happens sometimes. It's all a matter of going back to, go back to what was working before and not fall into a bad trend, if you want to call it that. But yeah, that's nothing. Yeah, really, it's been nice. I've been able to, like yesterday, I was able to catch up on a good amount of basketball. There were, they were kind of the cup. You had the IST in-season tournament and stuff going on. And I believe for the Warriors, I think they just need to like win one more, because they're technically undefeated in cup play or group play. So I think they just need to win one more to secure home court or something like that. You know what I mean? It'll be exciting. Hey, listen, it's a first time for the Warriors to be in, in sort of contention for the cup, right? It'll be interesting to see how that goes. And how seriously the team takes it. I mean, every win counts except for the championship, right? So it's like, I don't know. I think for teams such as the Pacers last year, where they were able to make it to the cup, it was a pretty big, it was a pretty big kind of moment for them, because essentially some of that success in the IST, you could argue, obviously there's levels to it, but you could argue that kind of translated to some level of playoff success, right? I mean, I think the Pacers are probably the most clear-cut example of a team that benefited from it. This year they're they're faltering a little bit due to like injuries and kind of some not so great play from Halliburton, but I think that other teams could sort of rise to the occasion. I think in the case of the Warriors, I mean, I think obviously they will care. I mean, they're competitive. Everyone, the Steph is competitive, Draymond is competitive, all that. But I am curious what if they do manage to continue to have success leading up into the Vegas stages of the tournament, if they how much level of how much are they putting into it. I think really the main thing, I do like the idea of it, right? I liked, last year it was pretty good. I think it's going to come down to what the incentive is for actually trying to win the whole thing, right? Other than pay. I mean, that is sort of like maybe a big draw for some of those players who aren't on these crazy large contracts, right? For some of those that are like the two-way players and that kind of thing, like an extra payday that can't hurt by any means. But I think at a certain point it's got to be more than that. I think there's got to be some other stakes that are going to be at play here. Because I think, the Lakers winning it last year, I think a lot of people are going to kind of discount it in a way. And they did have a little banner thing in crypto. I just don't know. I think for obviously for like a franchise like the Lakers, it's probably not really. It's just kind of a little asterisk, a little commemoration kind of thing. Nothing too big, but I do think for other teams and other franchises that haven't gotten to that same level of success, one little thing could mean a lot. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Is getting that kind of banner plus the cash and whatever additional income they're gonna get from winning the cup title, are all of those things gonna be enough, and is it gonna be enough to be sustained over the course of however long this thing is gonna keep up, right? I'm interested in seeing that. I do think that's probably going to be the biggest question. I think we'll see how it goes this year. We'll see how things shape up. But I do think that there's a lot. There could be a lot, and I think this could mean a lot to to, some of those younger teams and some of those teams that haven't, accomplished a ton, to get kind of their feet wet, if you want to call it that. We got more games coming up later today. I think some games have actually already started today, but so I'll probably catch up. Warriors are going to play the Suns later. We'll see how that goes. The Warriors have had two kind of back-to-back losses against the Spurs and then to the Thunder. The Thunder one I was not as, it was an ugly ass game, like especially toward the end of the game in the fourth quarter. Like the Thunder were just missing shots, like Shea just was bricking shots left and right until he hit like a dagger three at the end there. But Warriors weren't really making shit. Like it was just ugly. It was ugly. Steph wasn't playing too, so that kind of factored in. Kind of a disappointing loss, but it is what it is. Hopefully this will be a bit of a bounce back in a certain way. The Suns are kind of in a weird spot too, because they lost against the Nets recently, and the Nets are a weird ass team. They beat they went on just a tear on the West Coast, beating a bunch of Western Conference teams, including the Warriors, right? It was against the Spurs, and then it was the Nets, right? They put I'm trying to remember what happened. I'm trying to remember what the order of events was. I think they lost. The two losses that come to mind were against the Nets and the Spurs, and I think they also lost against the Thunder. Are they on a 3-game losing streak? I need to double check this right now before I completely lose my mind. So I'm looking at it now. They are on a 3-game losing streak. Okay, so I was right about that. It was the Nets game that was a weird one. That was the one that kind of threw me off, and I was just I don't understand what is happening here. And it was it was a combination. I think the Nets just have a bunch of just long kind of players, and the way they're playing under Jordi Fernandez has been really admirable in a lot of senses, right? I do think I think a lot of people, including Nets fans, I'm seeing are dude, we need to lose games. We can. This is not gonna be we need to, we're choosing a direction, and right now they're punching way above their weight. They did lose in a pretty severe fashion to the Magic, but they're still a weird kind of scrappy team with a bunch of, I don't want to say misfits because they're playing well together, but they don't have a unifying star. So it's a clear, I don't know. I think they're gonna have to find ways to lose, like the Raptors have been. The Raptors, how they've been tanking has been pretty impressive, right? And I actually speaking of, I noted this down a little earlier this past week, because I think it's worth talking about, because I do, obviously I don't watch every single game, but I am someone who does kind of comb through League Pass and just sort of pop in and out of games and whatnot outside of my Warriors. And I've watched a fair amount of kind of the tanking teams, the developing teams, in terms of how they're doing and whatnot, just to see kind of the direction they're going in, and if what they have, if they're able to build around the pieces that they do have, and if they are able to add a high lottery pick this upcoming draft, what kind of position they're going to be in. So I noted down that I thought it would be fun to rank the best NBA tank jobs so far, out of all the teams that are trying to, get to, get a lottery pick. I will say I haven't watched, extensively all the teams, but based on what I've seen, I feel like I can give like a decent, a decent rating of maybe like the top three teams that are in the category. I've already mentioned them, but the Raptors are probably the number one team. Because I've watched like a good amount of their games go down to the wire and them losing either by a buzzer beating shot like two times, once against Boston, once against Detroit, and then they lost a bunch of other times at the buzzer. RJ Barrett missing like a three for the win against the Nuggets. Like they've had so many losses like that. It's kind of crazy. So, they could have won any of those games, but they're like, you know what? They were just they kind of let it go. There's just like a lack of execution at the end there, which is like maybe it's a cause for concern, but considering the direction that they are clearly going for, I think that's like the best outcome, right? Obviously you do want to win some games because you don't want people to just kind of give up. Like, I know, like a losing team is hard to watch, but at least they're losing in a fashion where it inspires kind of some level of confidence moving forward. So the Raptors are my clear kind of number one in terms of like teams that are doing like an excellent job tanking, but also showcasing their youth. You looking at like, RJ Barrett, he's not like super young, but you could argue he's part of the core right now. We'll see, whether he's going to be kind of a long-term player for them. But and then you got Grady Dick, awesome name, fantastic name. And then Quickly, who's been injured. So that maybe that's been kind of to their detriment as well. They just haven't had enough of a scoring punch to get them over the hump. But yeah, Raptors have been doing, like, in terms of just like what they should be doing, I think they have a clear direction that they're going for, and good job. Good job to those guys. Another team that comes to mind, I think I would honestly say the Jazz. It's weird because I still am confused about the Lauri Markkanen signing. Like, I get it, you do need to have some level of vet experience and whatnot. And I think maybe that's sort of like the direction that like Danny Ainge and the rest of the front office is thinking of taking this team in. But they the beginning of the season they were really bad. They've started to pick it up. I haven't watched like a ton of Jazz games, but from what I've seen, they've played decently. They've won some games here and there against like the Knicks and stuff. So, they're able to squeak out some pretty impressive wins, and they can be competitive. Like they've definitely had some really rough games for sure, but yeah, I mean, as I said before, like Cooper Flag, Utah, I mean, it's like perfect, right? It's perfect for those guys. And then you already got Lauri Markkanen, and then you got what's his name? I've completely forgot his name. Walker Kessler, and then you got that one Utah kid, the one who's like he's Mormon and stuff. I don't remember his name. Flipakowski, something like that, right? So, I mean, it's like, it's perfect. It's like a match made in heaven. So, it'll be, I mean, I don't know how that's going to work out, obviously. The lottery, you never know. I mean, Atlanta got the first pick last year, so it's not a guarantee that you're going to get the number one pick, even if you are the worst team in the league. So, yeah. Number three, I would say, I'm hesitant to, it's either the Wizards or the Blazers. The Blazers are actually like decent. Like they've beaten Minnesota and they've beaten Sacramento yesterday. So they're able to play, well against kind of, competition. But there's still, I still think that there is like potential for them to, I mean, they're in the West, and so just automatically kind of being in that position, they're, they're, on the lower part of the Western standings. But I think that just like what they're able to do, is like pretty, and they got pieces too that they can trade away. Like, I think they're in a pretty good position. They still need to like lose maybe more games in order to be, considered to be in kind of the top three of the draft. But there's a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of I think hope there, and I think there's definitely some positivity to and some optimism to look forward to when looking at the Trailblazers. I mean, they were so like middling with, I mean, they had that kind of Western Conference run, which was a little, I don't know, with Dame and CJ McCollum, which was a little, I think there was some injury luck there for sure. But I think after that point, it's been a little while since they've really had, I don't know, the ability to move forward from that. And I think this year is kind of, I think they've actually done a pretty good job in terms of like pivoting from that point in terms of trading Dame. And it feels like they didn't have to go fully, I don't know, they didn't have to go full process, right? Like they weren't good last year, but there's still just hope in being able to, like, they have pieces they can trade away. Like there's a lot of things they can kind of work with, in comparison to a lot of other teams. So I think that puts them in a good spot. So they just kind of need to be like careful, if you want to call it that, careful, and lose the games that they need to, but also have the ability to show that they do have the talent in players like Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe and whatnot. So, and Donovan Clingan. So they have, I think they have a nice collection of players, including their tradable pieces. So I think that puts them in a decent spot. I was either going to say, for third, I was either going to say Washington or Portland, but I think Washington is just so bad, and it's unfortunate because like earlier in the year I was talking about, earlier in the season rather, I was talking about what I liked seeing from Coulibaly and like Bub Carrington and Alex Sarr and stuff like that. But since that first like couple of weeks, they've just completely, I mean, they're on a crazy losing streak right now. I think they're on let me just take a look. They're on a 13-game losing streak. Just awful. Like, that's so bad. And so, yeah, I feel for them, and I feel for their fans. Like, this was the direction, right, after trading Beal. But it still sucks, right? It still sucks. Like, you want to see them be somewhat competitive, like, but they're just bad. And they're just really bad. Their only 2 wins were against the Hawks, and now the Hawks are actually looking decent. And, they had a couple of wins back-to-back against Cleveland. So it was like, the Hawks are the weirdest team. Like, it's such a weird team. And I also like them, too. I kind of want to root for them in kind of this upcoming IST Cup. They did clinch a spot. So they got a nice little team going on. They're not like good, but they're like completely mid. They're the most 500 team that's existed in quite some time. So, but yeah, the Wizards, they're just, it's unfortunate. I hope that they can at least show some face. You don't want to go down what Detroit went down with the 28-game losing streak. Like, that's just kind of depressing, you know what I mean? And I think for the Pistons, in the Pistons' position last year, they were hoping that they could make like a bit of a jump. This year, I think, is like the year that they were hoping for last year, right? Which is really nice and really exciting to see. And in consideration of the Cup, they also have a chance to maybe make some noise in the in-season tournament. So that's pretty exciting too. That for them, that's like a good incentive for them to try to win something. You know what I mean? I think it'll be really good for that franchise. It'll be great for the fans. I know a lot of fans are really wanting, something from Detroit, like after just what they've been through for like the past, half a decade or so. So yeah, I hopefully that something kind of comes out of that. But going back to Washington, I think that they are, it's, do you want to be the worst team in the league? I don't know. It's like, it definitely improves your chances to get the number one pick, but as we saw last year, that didn't happen. Like, Detroit didn't get the number one pick, freaking Atlanta did. So it's like, I don't know. You got to be, I don't know if you want to be that bad, but that's, I guess you just got to kind of stay course and keep moving along. Anyways, yeah, we just got more basketball and all that stuff, good stuff coming up. I think next week is sort of going to be the last week for like group play for the cup, and then I think moving forward we're going to get like the semifinals and whatnot. So, interested in seeing how that works out. I have just been playing Dragon Quest 3. I think I've made pretty like significant progress. Like, I think I just need to grind a little bit more and then get like the final item before I sort of move on. Or I think there's like maybe a couple more things that I need to do, and then obviously try to grind before I move on to kind of the final stage of the game. But yeah, it's been good. It's been nice. I am looking forward, I think, I already mentioned this earlier, but I think the length of this was just right for me. Not like a crazy long JRPG, going strictly back to basics. It was nice to kind of get back into this world, at least just for a little bit. Yeah, it's just the right length for kind of this period and this season and whatnot. I think, and I actually already went ahead and purchased this, but the next game that I think I'm gonna play is gonna be Hyper Light Drifter, which I've heard really good things about. I heard some of the music. I heard just like the sort of the intro, or sort of like the trailer music, and I think that it's part of the OST too, where it was just like this beautiful piano playing, and I was like, and I saw the visuals as well, and then just kind of based on recommendations that I've seen, it's one of those things where again, it's going to be one of those things where I try not to go too much into it, and spoil myself on what happens in the game, but I think it was it was a combination of all those things that made me want to try it out, and I'm excited to get into it. It's a very different game. Well, I mean, indie games are always going to have this kind of flavor that's different from what I'm generally accustomed to. In terms of the graphics, the visuals, the storytelling style. Apparently there's not really any dialogue in this game, so that's pretty fascinating. And so I want to give this a shot. I know that I mentioned sort of in regards to Outer Wilds, where it just, I've had some really genuinely awesome and great experiences within playing that game, but I've just struggled to get back into it and beat the game itself, because just the gameplay loop and the ability to try to get to the ending of the game has been kind of frustrating for me. That being said, I like, that in itself is not going to turn me off from trying other things. You know what I mean? I think more so what it has kind of told me after playing, a good chunk of time with Outer Wilds, I would say probably more than the average playtime, just because I've been kind of I've struggled to like try to, line up the exact things that I need to do to continue on with the main objective of the game. But just based on the amount of time that I have played, I've discovered that that style of game is just not my cup of tea necessarily. Just sort of that, the gameplay loop, no pun intended. But that doesn't mean that I can't appreciate it. And because I have had some really cool moments of like, oh, that's how you figure it out, right? That's really cool. Like that I'm not going to take away, despite me having my grievances with the game. And that at all does not detract me, or dissuade me rather, from trying other games, other indie games that might challenge you a little bit more. Because I do appreciate a challenge, once in a while, right? I'm not someone who's like a hardcore gamer. I struggle with stuff like Dark Souls and that kind of thing, and that, it's like ultra hard games and that kind of thing. But challenging in the sense that it sort of makes me think differently, whether it is through the storytelling, whether it's through the game mechanics, just like a different way of engaging with the game from what I'm used to, right? And I think throwing that in there, amongst all the other, RPGs and whatnot that I play, is like I found that to be just like a really good balance. I've already, I've mentioned this before, just like having, the smaller game in between like the larger games and that kind of thing. But specifically, I think, just more indie games, more indie games, because of just kind of the creativity and like the innovation that they're able to bring to the table, right? That you don't necessarily see with larger AAA titles. And yeah, I just like I mentioned before, the music, the art style, what I've heard about just kind of maybe the more unconventional storytelling style of this game, I am interested in checking out Hyper Light Drifter. They had a sale going on the eShop. I picked it up for $5, and yeah, I'll most likely be getting into it next month. And yeah, that's probably going to be kind of the game that's sort of to cap off 2024. I mentioned before that I wanted to kind of do a bit of like a recap in terms of talking about the games that I've played this year. And I was thinking, honestly, of maybe doing something like that, like today, or like, end of November, which is basically now. But I think I'll probably do that after I beat Dragon Quest 3. And I think maybe once I dabble a little bit with Hyper Light Drifter, or once I beat it too. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, it's interesting. Since I kind of started that last year in terms of doing a bit of a retrospective of the games that I played, because last year was kind of the first year that I was sort of like keeping track of that kind of thing, right? And I was like actively seeking out, games to play and to talk about. Has been a really cool experience. I've really enjoyed doing that. One, because it's introduced me to so many games that I might not have, picked up before, and just allows me to kind of essentially just, just try out different things. And it's been really fun just to like talk about like what those specific games bring to the table. And yeah, I mean, I just enjoy talking about games, and there's so many out there, and I'll never run out, and that's really exciting to me. And I'm excited to talk more about it, and I'm excited to kind of talk, and I'm also just excited later this year, towards the end of the year, to talk about the games, just going back and revisiting the games that I did play and what I've found to be kind of my favorites and whatnot. I think it's really fun. because I had a lot of fun doing that last year as well, and I still think about kind of, just sort of, and I do kind of think about the games that I played in specific periods of the year, what I was doing at that time, what kind of headspace I was in. It sort of like brings me back, and really this podcast too, which was sort of my, initial intention of creating this so long ago, was to sort of record, as sort of like a little, journal of sorts, right? Outside of it being maybe potentially entertaining for some people. And so in a sense, it's both a journal of me just doing whatever, but also like a gaming journal in a certain way, right? And just having that both in place, I think is really great. And I can sort of actively look back on what I played and, the experiences that I had, and sort of like remember me having those experiences, right? I think it's cool to kind of have that as sort of a record keeper in a lot of instances, having this podcast as a record keeper. So, yeah, I'm excited to kind of delve into that. I'm excited to delve into the game, obviously. But I'm also excited to look back on what I played this year and just revisit them and see if maybe my thoughts have changed, or if there's anything else that I want to add, that I didn't talk about when I initially talked about them earlier this year. So, yeah, that's kind of what I have in mind, going into next month and the end of the year. Yeah, I mean, the list of games is never ending. It continues to grow as more games continue to come out. But that makes me really excited. And so I just, wanted to make note of that. That's going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you, as always, for listening. This has been Save the Semantics, signing off.